Welcome to the station, Kentucky's Conservative Outpost, the only program in the state of Kentucky and the city of Louisville that deals with news and politics from a conservative perspective. And so we're going to do an interesting program today. We're going to interview three candidates that are running in a primary in Senate District 7. So that's a district within this viewing area. If you're watching WBNA or listening to WGTK radio, that's within this listener viewing area. And it's District 7 is the Shelby County area, parts of J-Town, Fern Creek, Frankfort, as far south as Nelson County. No, not Nelson. No,
not quite far that side.
Yeah, well, we'll pull up this map here. You can see exactly what we're doing. So we got a map
Anderson
here.
County is
Anderson
part of that.
County. There we go. Anderson County, Shelby. Okay. So District 7. So we have three candidates: Ed Galrine, Aaron Reed, and Adrian. What's the last? Southworth. And so it's going to be a good interview. And there's this. We have a supermajority in both House, the House and the Senate in the state, and so it's important to have good candidates, because just because you have a majority doesn't mean you're going to get your agenda moved forward. Isn't that right, Jim?
Well, you have some differences within that majority.
That's right.
Adrian has been kind of she's been a voice willing to be the one no vote, or she's been willing to take some stands, particularly on election integrity issues and some other issues that have annoyed the leadership. I will say it that way. So it's so I guess the question here: will this district remain as more of a Liberty seat, from the Liberty caucus, or will it swing back toward a more of a traditional, Republican seat?
Right.
So I think that's going to be maybe one of the big questions here, and I think there's some significant differences between the candidates, which makes it good for voters. They have a choice.
Exactly right. Aaron Reed, who's running for Kentucky Senate District 7. And so, Aaron, welcome to the show. And of course, the show is called the station, Kentucky's Conservative Outpost. So we assume you're a conservative, you're running as a Republican. And so tell us about why you're running and what motivated you to jump into this race.
Well, I've been running for about 3 years. I got redistricted in the middle of my first campaign, but what got me into this was my kids. Proverbs says a good man leaves an inheritance for his children's children. And, if we're lucky or blessed enough to give them $1 million bank account, that'd be great. And I'm sure they would appreciate that. But if we don't have freedom and liberty as an inheritance to pass on to our kids, then that money is not worth spit.
Mm-hmm. Well said. There you go. So that's a good reason to run, is for the future. And so, Bob, I think Bob Scott's on the line with us here. So Bob, I think you had a question for Aaron.
Yeah, I met Aaron. It's probably been, I want to say 12 years ago. In fact, it was the first time I met him, was a Navy SEAL Foundation fundraiser that we did over in Louisville, and really got to know him much better at that time. And, I find it very interesting, Aaron, that you're pretty humble about some of your background. And I know that you participated in the Battle of Fallujah alongside a guy that got a little bit more notoriety by the name of Chris Kyle. And what I was really impressed with, though, in talking to you was, one, your love of the Lord, and how you felt God's hand was on you, when you felt like, I know you were in over 300 actual engagements, in which literally you could have died in each one. Talk a little bit about your relationship with God and how that's going to pertain to your serving the people of the 7th District.
There's a lot in that question, but I tell you, God has been a lamp into my feet and a light into my path, which is why I'm running for this office. And, like you said, I don't consider myself a hero by any means, but I did get to walk with and fight alongside a lot of different heroes that you've heard of in the SEAL teams that are legendary. They're headliners. But honestly, I believe that, and it's in our ethos as SEALs, that we are silent professionals. And whereas you'll hear me say that, I was a Navy SEAL, but that's about where it stops as far as going into a detailed history. We're not, in our ethos, we don't seek to gain notoriety for the things that we've done, because it's service, and to me, I always knew I was going to serve. I started off as a Cub Scout, went through Arrow of Light, became an Eagle Scout, and I always knew I was going to join the military. My dad always said, America's free because good men serve. And so I never had any other option in my mind, in my heart, than serving in the military. And I got to serve my country in style by the grace of God. I made it through SEAL training. And then, that was just the beginning. In SEAL training, they always tell you, this is not as cold as you're ever going to be. It's not as hard as it's ever going to be on you. You're going to have way more dangerous experiences when you make it into this rodeo. And they were absolutely right. I can't tell you how many close calls that I've had that I know of. We sit and we read the Bible and we think about, all the things that God has preserved us that we don't even know about. And for the ones that we do, man, I could write a book on just the close calls that have happened where rounds have zipped by my ears.
I want to hear more about those stories. That's amazing service and what a heroic sacrifice just to be involved in all that. And so, but we got about 5 minutes left. And so why don't we touch on what are some of the key issues that you feel like that need to be dealt with in Frankfort right now? I mean, and also how would you approach the Beshear administration right now? Because as a conservative, and as I'm sure you have some concerns about his policies, and so how do you take on the Beshear administration, and just what are some of the key issues that are going to motivate you to, or that you want to affect when you're in office?
Well, I've got my three pillars are faith, family, and freedom. The things that I run on with my candidacy, because it's simple and it really doesn't need to be any more complicated than that. As far as dealing with the liberal executive side there, thank goodness we're being elected to a team. I'm not running for an office that has, you're not becoming a king. You have to work at a team level, and being a SEAL, I'm used to working as a team and, at elite level and bringing folks together to accomplish a mission. And one of the big things I would say I would like to focus on starting off is school choice. That's one thing that's extremely lacking in our state. Every other state around us has the opportunity for school choice, but because our Kentucky Constitution does not have any type of language to allow that, then we have to add an amendment. So in November, there's going to be an election, and on the ballot, Kentuckians will be able to vote to amend our Kentucky Constitution to allow school choice. And I'm looking forward to being a part of that in the event that I make it into the Senate to help spearhead anything I can bring to the table on bringing school choice, good options to empower parents and to allow the money to follow the students instead of the systems.
That's great. It's great, Aaron. There's been some tension within the Republican caucus in Frankfort about this issue, but it sounds like you're pretty convinced and pretty persuasive about that. So maybe you can help some of your fellow legislators, especially those from rural areas who seem to be afraid of this issue. But it'd be great to have that approach where you can persuade and really use your influence to bring people along on this.
Well, I'm a little more motivated than most. I got skin in the game. I got 6 kids, and 2 of them have already graduated, and 4 of them are very much locked into the school system. And, I've got 2 in homeschool. I've got 2 that have graduated and 2 in the high school, very athletic. They're in every different sport you can think of. So, pretty good background in education, and we're neck deep in it.
So Bob, I'll let you have the last question here. We got about 2 minutes left.
Yeah, and one of the things, just real briefly, Aaron, you have a strong business background as well. How do you feel that will assess your efforts in Frankfort?
Well, as a SEAL, you're a problem solver by nature, but as a business owner, you're juggling cats, and sometimes you're going to get scratched. So you learn a lot on how to, work with people of all different types, both customer and management staff, as well as employees. Being a business owner, you always have to make payroll, and I've never missed a beat. So, I get it.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. God bless you, and we wish you best of success as far as the upcoming primary.
Thanks, sir.
We are here to defend democracy.
Misinformation poses a threat to our nation's health.
Climate change is an emergency.
Democratic socialism.
Codify women's right to choose.
Hell yes, we're going to take your AR-15.
Ed Gowrine. He's running for District 7, Senate District 7, and that's a district. I'm going to pull the map up here so you can see this. It's a district sort of in the eastern part of our viewing area, from a little bit of Jefferson County, Shelby County, Frankfort, so more to the east. And he has two other competitors in this race, but we wanted to talk to Ed first. And so Ed, welcome to the show. Tell us, why are you running for office? And what do you feel like you can do as a state senator?
All right, thanks for having me on. And can you hear me okay?
Sure can, yeah.
Well, first of all, we have deep roots in Kentucky. I'm a fifth generation farmer. We've been farming in Kentucky for over 100 years. We don't see the world through the optic of the next election cycle or even the next growing season. We see a generational perspective. And so I'm genuinely going to bring that to Frankfort Vice again, a different kind of construct. As you mentioned earlier, I'm a Navy SEAL, but for differentiation, I'm a 30-year active duty career Navy SEAL officer. That means 24/7, 365 all over the world for our nation. And then I got back to Kentucky finally and got back to farming. And along the way there, I earned 4 Bronze Stars, if you count my combat jump badge, which means literally jumping into a free fire zone under canopy. And I want to bring that kind of knowledge, skills, and abilities and faithfully serve the folks of this district, the counties, and the communities to give them a voice in Frankfort. Additionally, in Frankfort, I intend to go over there and build relationships and get things done. I'm a Reagan Republican, straight up. You win by the merit of your argument, the point you put forward, and you win the messaging. And so I intend to do that with my background, having done that 30 years as a senior Navy SEAL officer and leader and an Army Ranger, and also as a senior advisor for foreign policy and national security to the highest levels of our U.S. government. What that means is develop and implement strategy and obtain your outcomes. You have to work through stakeholders, never compromise your convictions, principles, and values. And one last thing I might share with you, have any of you gentlemen on here ever met a federal whistleblower?
No, not personally.
You have today.
Oh, great.
I'm the only 2-time federal whistleblower in the state of Kentucky. It is a crucible that words cannot explain. No law firm in the state of Kentucky would take my case. It happened after I retired. I was working for federal agencies. I have a top secret SCI clearance. I have all the leadership and management skills to do what I was asked to do in that role, but there was wrongdoing going on. I discovered it. I took corrective action. What I discovered, career government officials had been involved in some very corrupt and improper behavior and actions for years. Then they came after me. No law firm in the state of Kentucky would take my case. Ed, you can't beat the federal government. I don't know if you know this, and I won't go into too much detail, but a whistleblower case isn't a 1-800 phone call. It isn't an anonymous tip. It's a lawsuit against the cabinet secretary that sits in the room with the president. And when that piece of paper drops on their desk, it's game on. I won both cases, and then I beat them in federal court here in Kentucky. I will take that grit, that professionalism, that faithfulness to Frankfort, and I'll represent these communities, these counties, and the Commonwealth to stand up against federal government, state government, officials that are, not carrying out their assigned roles and duties. And I will have that dedication to that, if that makes sense.
And it's going to be an interesting race to see who wins this primary, because I think we're more than qualified to be a state senator, and plus I think you'd be a really good representative for your area, because you have quite a few farms. It's very rural. This district's very rural, and so you'd be a great representative.
It's a diverse economic ecosystem. I
It
get
is.
that.
Yeah.
Galrons are involved in retail, wholesale, as Bob
Exactly.
knows. We're production agriculture, the works. But it's a diverse economic ecosystem, not just farms.
That's exactly right. Yeah, it's in a growing area. Just promising one thing: if you do win, I want to see you do a halo jump on the state capitol, just to show that Navy SEALs are here.
I could do that.
We're going to take it on.
Wait a minute.
So-
I was a stick leader because I was heavy. I
There you
could
go.
do it.
You're true Kentucky.
Oh,
Well,
my
thanks.
wife went to Southern Baptist Seminary. She went to
There you go.
Western. She couldn't get in at Murray.
Good stuff. All right, Ed. Thanks for being on the show, and good luck with the race. And yeah, we really appreciate your time. So we'll talk to you very soon. So we'll be right back with another candidate.
We are here to defend democracy.
Misinformation poses a threat to our nation's health.
Climate change is an emergency.
Democratic socialism.
Codify women's right to choose.
Hell yes, we're going to take your AR-15.
All right, now we have Adrienne Southworth, and she is the final candidate running in this race for Senate District 7, and we've interviewed her competitors at this point, and so we're honored to have her on the program. Actually, you would be considered a somewhat of an incumbent in this district, but this district was redistricted, or yeah, I guess that's the right way to say it, redistricted. Can't talk today. Words, I'll find them, and they. So in other words, this is not your district that you've historically represented. So, but some of it is. But so many
Well, it
voters.
is now. I mean, she's now representing it because.
Oh,
of the
that's true. Well, there we
redistricting.
go. Exactly right.
Yeah.
So you're the incumbent, right? So voters know who you are, and somewhat. But for those that maybe don't or are not real familiar with you, tell us about who you are, why you are in office, and why you want to run and continue running for state senate.
Yes, well, I was elected in 2020, and my district at that time was pre the new census. And so I have not been on many of the voters' ballots, but I have served this district for 3 years now since the redistricting after the census. So I do love what we've been able to accomplish, the things that we've been doing. There's a lot more to do, obviously. I think we all know that. And really what I bring to the table is I just finished my 16th legislative session in some form or fashion. Half of that was all volunteer. The others has been split between my executive branch work with former Lieutenant Governor Janine Hampton, and then now as the elected senator, and just really bringing all of that together. In my experience, as I train other legislators and citizens and getting involved and so forth, there's just a learning curve, right? And once you start getting upwards past that initial flat part of the curve, you can really move with more speed toward the goals. And it's really fun for me because I did learn a lot of legislative process before I even was in public service full time at all. But now having the executive stuff, bringing it in, seeing the front end before it happens, knowing what the back end is going to look like, I can advise other, senators were trying to think through these things. And then also just getting faster at what I do. I used to spend all my time reading all the bills, and now I only spend like a third of my time still reading all the bills. So that gives me more time to do other things, moving more footballs forward, as I call it, on the field.
Absolutely. A lot of people critique politicians that stay in office too long, and they use pejoratives like career politicians. But there's a lot to be said about experience and just being around, government and understanding how things work. And so someone with experience can help move the ball further down the field because they know who to call, they know how to read things, how to approach things. So that's a great thing to have, and it sounds like you're set up well for that. Jim, you have a
Well,
Yep, your thought on that?
Adrian, thanks for taking some time today. Appreciate that. And, there's so many bills. I mean, I think this session there was like 1,220 bills, if I counted right. You have a lot of proposals coming at you. How many of those, and how do you determine what your priorities are going to be, and what will be your priorities here in the next legislative session, and if you're reelected, and what are your policy priorities going forward? Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, I have a lot of time into research and development on a lot of issues. There's some issues that we just don't ever seem to get deep enough into, and some go undone because, there's always something else in front of it. And so a lot of legislators will focus on one or two things, write a bill about that, and then just work on that for several years. When I was in the grassroots side, I found that didn't work for me because if I got to an impasse, then it's banging your head against a brick wall. Then what do? Instead of going home, I would just switch to my next thing and then start working on that. So I'm always looking for where can I get consensus the fastest, because there's so many things wrong. There's plenty of opportunities to make some difference somewhere. So I have a lot of, like I said, footballs on the field. And then as I can pick them up, depending on, I kind of feel my way through with other legislators. What are they wanting to focus on? What do they care more about? What do they already know? So we don't have to do as much, education on the front end. Which groups are already in favor or opposed, depending on what the bill is, right? So I kind of am in a constant monitoring of the flow to see where our best paths are forward. Specifics. In the past, everyone knows I started 3 years ago. I spent a whole summer and fall really focusing on election security, and I've continually developed more things on that. This year I filed more bills than I've ever filed. Didn't intend to necessarily file more bills, but I did intend to file more bills because I split them all up. Instead of having 3 or 4 different pieces of a whole into one bill, I put every single piece in a separate number so that we could talk more specifically on these smaller issues instead of these large everything plus the kitchen sink type bills. And then maybe a year or two ago, I focused on the child abuse situation. We have a child welfare system that is not serving families well at all. A lot of people are aware of, really either egregious things or, just they're at a total impasse. They can't get help. They're being harassed. I mean, there's all kinds of issues that happen, and kids are bouncing around foster family to foster family. Families are just being ripped apart, and we have to figure out how to do better. And so I've done a deep dive on that the last year. I look for that to be a key thing that I push forward in the next year or so, because we've got a lot of exciting developments and people are really interested in this work. And then if I am reelected, because every year I kind of have one thing I really focus on, and I've done so much work, I think I need to get all of these to the next level. But I do have one more research project I am going to commit to this year, and that is the education bureaucracy. I tried to get into it every year. I try to get into it. It is so huge. It's just really impossible to do. And I think that some of the work I've done in other areas, especially into federal law and things, is maybe equipping me to try taking a bite off of that elephant once again.
Yeah. Well, certainly we see a lot of potential there, I think. And, when this governor came into office, the first thing he did was get rid of the former Board of Education, State Board of Education, all of whom were supportive of school choice, but also of transparency and accountability on how dollars got spent. And so those are some areas that have gone, really, and still a lot of work to do, I guess, in those areas.
Yeah, and a follow up to that, Jim, if you don't mind, Senator Southworth. Again, thank you for joining us today. Your time is very much appreciated. As we know, there will be a constitutional amendment that the legislature did pass. It'll be on the ballot this fall. What is your position on that?
Well, I voted in favor of it then, and I will vote in favor again this fall. One of the things I was very happy with was we saw that coming down the pike, and it was frozen in the House due to language issues. I'm huge on making sure the Constitution is high quality. And when we're amending the Constitution, we shouldn't do it lightly. And there's a lot of feeling, it seems like, in Frankfort where let's just write it and get it over with. And that's not the way to go. I think we need to be really deliberate on exactly what we're doing and how we're doing it. And then the voters are going to be seeing this and having to make a decision. So before that even came into the Senate, I was already working with several folks to try to work on language choice. How do we crystallize this to be the best possible thing that does what we want it to do? And so I'm pretty happy with the way it landed.
Good luck to you in this campaign, and thanks for being on the program. And we'll be back next week with the station. And remember, we recap. We just talked to 3 different candidates from that are running for office for District 7, Senate District 7, which is the sort of the eastern part of our viewing area, Shelby County, parts of Jefferson County, the Anderson County, Frankfort area. And so great candidates, and we wish them all the best. And we'll see you next week.
Thank you all.